Hello again today. We're going to be talking about public opinion. Public opinion is a very strange thing, and most certainly if you look at the module, you'll see that some very strange ideas are sometimes put out by very influential people, people who are well known and often rewarded for spreading information or sometimes misinformation. I find it interesting. I live in an area that's very conservative, and I had neighbors that would want to talk to me about politics. And I would discuss things, and I'd mention such and such. And interestingly enough, they said, oh, that's not true. It just didn't happen that way. Well, they only listen to certain news sources, not to all of them, and most certainly not to a balanced view of them. Public opinion isn't always aware. But what public opinion is feelings that people have that they are generally willing to express. If they're not willing to say anything about it, then it doesn't really count. They are kind of acquired through a process of socialization and a variety of other factors. Most certainly your family and peers and people like this are very, very important. That's how you do it. It's hard to buck family members or disagree with all your friends. They're highly influenced by newspapers. If you take a look at polls relative to who Trump supporters listen to and who they watch in news, it's completely different. I mean, there's just two sources they trust. Whereas in comparison, BBC, PBS, and things like this are considered unreliable, fake news by many of these people. And of course, those of us who do not rely upon Fox News often finds the things on Fox News to be strange and difficult. Most certainly other kinds of things are our political institutions and our leaders. The Republican Party at times is anti-deficit. Other times it's not a big issue, largely upon what the position of the president is at the time. Even though many congressmen, Republican congressmen, may feel uncomfortable, they generally, as a group, do not fight a position of the president. And as a result, most people who follow are the same way. Most constituents, average citizens are the same way. Other things that make a difference are things like religion. Most certainly, we've noticed that those who refer to themselves evangelical are often have much more conservative opinions than others. The region, the South and Midwest, tend to be very, very conservative, whereas the coastal areas seem to be predominantly more progressive or to at least considerably different than those areas on many, many issues. Age, the older you are, the more you tend to have conservative views. That's somewhat understandable. When you're 70, you don't have a chance to start over easily. Gender makes a difference. Women are far more dependent, particularly when they're raising children, on sometimes public services. Men are not. They do not get caught the same way. Therefore, women tend to be more concerned about making sure there's a safety net, and they will express this publicly. Race and ethnicity, most certainly we see division there. Opinions are starkly different between Black citizens and Hispanic citizens and those who are of more white, non-Hispanic background. Most certainly, the political ideology people express sometimes filters the information they get and reflects in a high level of acceptance of what they want to hear and rejection of what they don't want to hear. And that is often reflected in their own opinions through tweets, personal conversations, whatever, in terms of public opinion. What are the areas that we disagree on? Most certainly the death penalty and abortion. These are areas we've been fighting over for 40, 50 years. Marijuana legalization. It's not as long a fight because most certainly those who supported it were a small minority until maybe 15 years ago, but it's a big issue at this time. The rights of criminals. Almost certainly the rights of anybody who's being apprehended by police. We see a big difference again on this as reflected by the different kinds of opinions being expressed relative to what happened with the protests relative to stemming from the death of George Floyd. Pollution control, most certainly. Many people feel like this is really a critical issue. I'm one of them, most certainly. Whereas others say, well, it's just all you're trying to do is restrict business and keep us from growing adequately. Race issues. Well, these are very, very strongly debated at this time, and I think they will continue to be. Well, certainly a year ago, the tariffs that Donald Trump had put on China and other countries were an issue. Not as much anymore. But taxes are a big issue. Most certainly, we saw the Republicans pass a major tax cut bill in 2017, which resulted in quite a significant deficit over the next 10 years. If it had been up to others, they would have done the opposite. They would increase the taxes to address what needs to be done. But most certainly, you see it even in short-term issues, such as coronavirus. There's a big opposition to closing down the government, homes, and things like this to try to prevent it. Others are saying that, no, what you're doing is you're infringing on their rights to be freely mobile and run their businesses as they please. And most certainly, those who are afraid of the potential effects of the coronavirus argue that very differently in these kind of opinions. What does public opinion do? It has very, very little on specifics. Most certainly politicians pay attention to it. We pay attention to it all the time. We look at the polls, we see what's going on. But generally, you don't see public opinion being reflected immediately in laws. Sometimes when you see a major change in public opinion that seems to be continuously in the same direction, such as with gay marriage, you start seeing the institutions respond to it and change in the kind of outputs they have. However, what we hope for, at least, is it will put guidelines around. If a politician lies, politician basically acts in a fashion other than what we believe would be appropriate, and public opinion basically finds this and generally agrees with it, then hopefully the idea is that public opinion will be felt, will be experienced, and change will occur. That is at this particular time the hope of many of us relative to the way in which police interact with our minority opinions, citizens rather. And what we're talking about there is, of course, we're hoping that public opinion is such and so strong that at this time, people will react, they'll change laws, and make the system fairer. Well, thank you again for being here. I'll try to keep it short. See you again soon. Goodbye.